Thanks everybody for being here today. I know everybody's busy this time of year. We really appreciate it, and thanks Mick for helping us put together this webinar. So just as Mike just spoke about managing cool season grasses, I'm going to speak a little bit about some like cultural practices for managing grasses in warm season climates. So as Dr. Gertall spoke about, those would be primarily Bermuda grass and Bahia grass. So if we look at our major turfgrass cultural practices, really we can kind of put most of these into 5 general categories. So we've got mowing, fertilization, irrigation, cultivation, which Mike just alluded to. And that cultivation, obviously we can't go out and till our fields like you would in a production agriculture setting, but this cultivation includes aerification, verticutting, and some other associated practices. Talk about aerification and verticutting today. And then the hope is that if we can do all 4 of these first ones correctly, then we spend less time on pest control as that last cultural practice for turfgrass maintenance. So as Dr. Gertall spoke about the warm season grasses, we've got a much different growth curve for the warm season grasses than we do for the cool season grasses. So in the spring, we're coming out of dormancy, typically in the mid-Atlantic area. This is going to be sometime around April to May. Further south, obviously, it's going to be earlier than that. And as the season warms up, we start getting more and more shoot growth. And we notice that with warm season grasses, our root growth is commensurate with that shoot growth as we go through the heart of the summer. And then as we get into shorter days and cooler nighttime temperatures, that growth starts to slow down as we get into September and further into October before we go into dormancy in the winter. Now, the reason I wanted to show this again, and I know Dr. Gertall spoke about this, but the reason I wanted to show this again is because really this shows us when we should be fertilizing warm season grasses. So just to kind of compare the growth curves with the cool season grass versus warm season grass, obviously in the summer, warm season grasses, and then with cool season grasses, we've got this bimodal growth in both the spring, slows down a bit in the summer, and then we have additional growth occurring during the cool season months during the fall. But again, with the warm season grasses, we're mainly looking at May to September, maybe first part of October if you're further south. So as Mike just alluded to, soil testing is kind of the crux of the development of a fertility program. And this is performed to estimate the plant's nutrient requirements. Usually we do this to determine the soil pH, the phosphorus level, potassium level, and certainly our other secondary and micronutrients as well. So I think as Mike alluded to too, we generally base nitrogen applications on kind of the art of turfgrass management as well as university recommendations, but also with consideration into what type of traffic we have on that particular site. And so because the nitrogen within the soil is so changeable from month to month to month, you can soil test for nitrogen, but that information has limited use. And so that's why we typically base our nitrogen applications on experience, university recommendations, and kind of that growth pattern of the plant based upon whether it's warm season or cool season and the weather we're having that particular year. So if we look at fertilization, Bermuda grass, typically looking at anywhere from 3/4 to a pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per growing month. So if you're further up north, like I am here in Maryland or Kentucky or Southern Indiana, you're going to have less of a growing season. If you're further south in the Gulf Coast or Florida, certainly have a much longer growing season. Converted those into metric for folks who think a little bit more about this in metric. And then for Bahia grass, this is a grass that does not require as much nitrogen inputs as Bermuda grass and certainly we don't expect the performance out of Bahia grass that we do for Bermuda grasses. And so we have a lower nitrogen input. Now, notice I changed the unit of time here to a year. So 2 to 3 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per year for Bahia grass versus 3/4 to 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per growing month for Bermuda grass. And then again, as I mentioned, we're trying to really focus on this late period of time from late spring through the summer into late summer and early fall, kind of depending on where you're located within the country. So typical recommendation in our part of the world here in the Mid-Atlantic has been to try to make your last fertilization application about a month before you expect first frost. And the thinking with this is that it gives the grass an opportunity to kind of start to adapt to the cold instead of trying to keep growing. You're trying to adapt that to the cold as the nights get a little bit cooler, days get shorter. So it's been the recommendation here in our transition zone area. Okay, just one other note about fertilization. We can very broadly divide some of our fertilizer sources into water insoluble or slow release, or water soluble, which is quick release. So some of the quick release sources would be things like ammonium sulfate or urea, and some of our water insoluble or slow release nitrogen sources would be products like sulfur coated urea, polymer coated urea. Of course, we have polymer coated, sulfur coated urea products that have both, and then urea formaldehyde or methylene urea type products. These are, and I would also put organic products into this water insoluble category here. Don't have it listed, but certainly those four groups are predominant, the predominant groups of fertilizers that we would characterize as water insoluble or slow release. And the benefit of going with these is that you get a longer release curve. So if you have something like straight urea or straight ammonium sulfate, then that produces a pretty quick growth response. But it also, because it's soluble, it doesn't last in the root zone of the plant as long either. So with these slow release products, you get a longer lasting. Some of these polymer coated, sulfur coated products can last 5, 6, 10, 12 weeks, even longer, depending upon the product. So it gives you a more gradual release characteristic and a more gradual feeding over time. Second cultural practice I wanted to talk about briefly is mowing. In general, we want to think about using what's called the 1/3 rule. So try not to remove any more than 1/3 of the leaf blade at a given mowing. As a guideline. Other things that we can do that really help play into turf health and quality are to be able to sharpen or replace the blades on a regular basis. As Dr. Goatley noted with tall fescue, especially tall fescue and ryegrass, if we have dull blades, we can get this ripping instead of a clean cut. With Bermuda grass, that's in Bahia grass, it's possible as well. So we want to make sure that we have sharp blades on the mowers. And then our mowing heights, didn't name an exact height here, but we do know that higher mowing heights will provide better wear tolerance, better rooting for those turf grasses. And so a lot of times we're trying to mow at the highest height that will also advocate for healthy grass, good footing. And I use the term playability, which we use that term in golf and sports turf. I know there's a little bit of poetic license with that term, perhaps in the horse world, but I think performance is a good substitute for that. So we're trying to kind of meet in the middle there between healthy grass, good footing for the equine athletes, and the type of performance that we want. Obviously, we're mowing a polo field at a lot shorter height than we are a thoroughbred racing track or an eventing course. So certainly we want to advocate for that playability and performance when we're choosing our mowing height, but just know that the higher the mowing height, typically the healthier grass we will have, all things being equal. So another thing to think about too is thinking about if we can kind of alter our mowing pattern a little bit for racetrack. I know in working with Laurel and Pimlico here in Maryland, we can move the rails on the turf track to different sites, and so we're not we're trying to vary that mowing pattern so we don't get this tracking or rutting near the rails. And so here we are with our rails, and obviously they can move those in or out, kind of depending upon the event. But if we're mowing in the same tracks every time, that can kind of lead to a bad situation where we start to get some rutting and tracking. So you want to try to, if at all possible, try to vary your wheel tracks on a given surface. Here's an example. I believe those are actually cool season turfgrass blades, but the point remains nonetheless for warm season. If we have dull blades, you're going to get this ripping and tearing as opposed to a quality clean cut shearing on the turfgrass blade. So this helps with health, and it also helps with appearance to have good sharp blades. Here you see a lot of blades, from a dull mower. These kind of get, as I said, ripped, but also you look here, I mean, they can kind of get bruised. So you have a bruised, ripped type of appearance that isn't very thrifty, nor looks very good from an aesthetic quality standpoint. Moving along in our cultural practices, we think about irrigation. So I know that a lot of our higher end facilities are going to have irrigation, and so one of the big things to think about with the irrigation is consistent coverage. So I know that with a lot of the kind of cannon systems that we might use for a thoroughbred racing track, it's we don't have the precision that we might with a smaller field like a sports field, but trying to ensure relatively consistent coverage. As Mike Bookholder alluded to, the moisture content of the soil is going to make a difference in footing, going to make a difference in how that track responds to the traffic. So that consistent coverage, I can do a whole lecture on looking at irrigation audits, but I'll just say that looking at consistent coverage is very important for your irrigation system. The other thing to think about too is precipitation rate. So, for instance, how much water are you putting out in inches per hour or millimeters per hour when you're running that irrigation for a given amount of time? So if you're able to kind of evaluate that and kind of put some rough numbers on that precipitation rate and the coverage, that's going to help more in the way that you manage your irrigation system. As Mike just alluded to, a moisture meter is a great tool for being able to kind of quickly ascertain what the moisture content of the soil is, and this can be used to guide irrigation decisions. Another way to guide irrigation decisions would be through measuring evapotranspiration. So we think about that with regards to evaporation from the soil surface, which if we have a dense turfgrass stand, we don't have much evaporation from the soil surface, but we do have a lot of transpiration as that water moves from the root zone through the stems and out through the stomates, small openings in the leaves. So one kind of guideline is that if we look at the baseline evapotranspiration for warm season grasses, we typically multiply that evapotranspiration rate by about 0.6 as a crop coefficient. And this provides a good guideline for how much water we should be trying to replace. And again, I'll say guideline. This typically comes into, the art of turfgrass management, as well as your decision making with regards to the firmness of the surface, the visual assessment of the health of the plant. But all of these both the moisture meter and the watering via ET losses can be a good guide for informing your management decisions. So with the moisture meter, we've got different length probes on here. This works by sending an electrical current between the two probes, and then the amount of volumetric water content is going to be correlated to the current that is moved between the two probes, and then that can be kind of calculated and displayed on the screen there. So obviously, picture here from golf course, we use this a lot, golf course putting green management, but I think this is also a great tool for your surface management for your various racing and eventing and polo surfaces. So just another quick mention about uniformity. This was a project done by our GPS class here on campus, and just looking at this engineering field, about the size of a soccer or football field, and just looking at some of the disparity among different areas with regards to the volumetric water content there. So obviously, the goal, and it's more difficult obviously when you have several acres to maintain, but trying to get a relatively consistent volumetric water content should certainly be a goal to provide a consistent surface for equine athlete footing. So those are the three of the main cultural practices. We'll kind of move into cultivation here just very briefly. So Mike had mentioned holotine cultivation. So sorry, I kind of adapted this from golf a little bit. In golf, it reduces playability, but in cool season grasses, we're looking at spring and fall. Summer, for warm season grasses, we're looking at doing this during the growing season so that we have good recovery. So you can do this in the summer. And basically you're pulling these cores out of that surface. Now, the other thing to think about too with our higher mown turfs that we use in equine sports is this deep tine cultivation. So if we're using just a regular hollow tine air fire, the risk that we run is that we're going to the same level each time, the same depth each time. So being able to vary the depth of cultivation using deep tine aerification and varying that anywhere from 8 to 16 inches over the course of time will help to ensure that we don't develop what they call a pan layer, which is a hard pan layer underneath. So I would echo what Mike said with regards to top dressing. If you're top dressing, pick a material and stay with it. You don't want to shift from sand to compost or topsoil. You want to pick a consistent top dressing source and stay with that consistent top dressing source. Not going to say a lot about cultivation right now. I know that we have another session, I believe, next Monday, where we're talking a little bit more about cultivation. So I'm going to kind of breeze through this relatively quickly. One other thing that we can look at too is verticutting. Some people call this vertical mowing. And basically this entails taking a machine that has vertical blades. So instead of cutting the grass, this is actually digging into the grass. You can set these for different depths. And basically you're getting into that canopy to try to bring up some of the organic matter. So this organic matter would be the thatch, which would be the intermingled layer of stems and roots that grow below the green portion of the plant. And so these can be tractor mounted. And then this is kind of what it looks like here. Again, sorry, don't have a equine track example, but this is a warm season home lawn here. So you can see here that you've got quite a bit of organic debris that's pulled from the surface. So with our warm season grasses, we know that Bermuda grass has both stolons and rhizomes. So it has a great capacity for developing a lot of organic matter, and being able to occasionally kind of thin that out is one benefit of verticutting or vertical mowing. Okay, so with that, I think I did keep it to 20 minutes. Tough to keep everything to 20 minutes here, but just want to cover those few things. Like I said, we'll talk more about cultivation next time. I want to thank everybody for the invitation to speak today. You can see my contact information there at the University of Maryland and on Twitter. And thank you everybody for your attention today.
This is Karen, and this is her land. She's been here a long time, along with Mojo. The first fence post went up here. Now there's 5,000 of them. After the storm, she started the cleanup here. And when she needs some peace and quiet, she always finds it right here. This is more than just land, it's home. Karen runs with us on a John Deere 3E Series tractor, because who says a day's work has to take all day? Nothing runs like a Deere. Search John Deere 3E Series for more.
Being a teenager and in high school and middle school is not easy for girls these days. And they get to come here, spend time working around the farm, spend time with the animals, and not feel that pressure until we go to horse shows. The first time I saw this land, I was about 12 years old. I came here with an old mentor. I fell in love with it as a little girl, and I said I was gonna own it one day. My mother, when I was 4 years old, put me on a little pony walking around the zoo. That was it for me. Love at first sight. Like any kid, when I was younger, I wanted to compete more in the Olympics and go Grand Prix and do things like that. But I put that all on the side and realized I had a different agenda in life. I've taught about 800 kids in this area. A typical day starts early in the morning with feeding the horses. Then usually we clean stalls. This is a daily chore, sometimes twice a day. I'm always on the tractor, mowing, spreading things around, you name it. This is a John Deere 3025E. I love my tractor. I couldn't live without it. I like to just relax and be left alone. I call it my husband. He's very reliable, and it doesn't argue. It's so easy to use. My 68-year-old mother has never driven anything like this before, and she was scared to death of it. And once she did, she loves it. She drives it all the time for me and helps me out around the farm. Being here in Florida, we deal with a lot of hurricanes, so it can be very stressful when we're in the path of one. That John Deere helps me so much. We go around picking up debris, moving, pushing things with the bucket. I always have an average of 50 students, so whenever there's a disaster that comes around, they're always here and they're ready to work. I call all my girls my kids. They're like part of my family, and they get scholarships for riding, and so we try to keep our sport here a little bit serious but fun. We go to the horse shows. It's great for them. Good, very nice. It teaches them a lot of sportsmanship, how to be more in charge and have more self-confidence. A little stronger on that. There. The parents tell me all the time, you are such a huge influence in our child's life. I love to share my experience with these girls and be able to steer them in a better path. Everybody always asks me, how do you keep doing this? I say, just the sheer passion of it. What am I gonna do? Get a condo on the beach somewhere? I'm happier here. I'm Karen Neese, and this is my land.